Information about the world of running, inspiration to fuel passion and excellence, and ideas for making connections and finding community. You're listening to A to Z Running. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the A to Z Running Podcast, where we help runners thrive. I'm Andi.
And I'm Zach, and this episode is fueled by cinnamon and pumpkin spice donuts from Robinette's.
Yum. I feel like fall is for donuts and cider. I love them so much.
Also, the rest of the year is for donuts. Cider, I'm indifferent.
Yeah.
So be sure, before you do anything else, to head to AtoZrunning.com and click follow in the corner. And feel free while you're at it to check out that word coaching as well. And jump on YouTube because you are trying to prove Andi right in our argument. And hit YouTube, click subscribe on A to Z Running's channel. And then you got to actually listen to some of the episodes or watch them because it's a video thing. But who watches? Well, anyway, if you can prove Andi right by watching more than people are listening, you got a long way to go yet.
Yeah. We still have a way bigger following on podcasts, but our YouTube channel is still young, so there's hope yet. I have to say, though, we had a couple people reach out after our previous episode saying both. So, like, some people were like, hey, I was
50-50.
watching on YouTube or I was listening on podcasts. But it makes sense for those of you running that you are listening today.
So thanks to those who are reaching out and sharing thoughts, comments, questions, and other things, like this question from Juliana.
Yes, and she said, hey guys, I have a 5K time trial on my own. Do you have any tips or tricks to racing a good time with no one to run with or against? It's a tough thing, right? I mean, running on your own and trying to chase like an imaginary ponytail, which is actually what I recommended that she did.
That's the advice. Chase imaginary ponytails.
Yeah.
Or unicorns and rainbows.
Well, this is what helps me, like, to keep my eyes up. I'll imagine that their ponytails just a slight distance ahead of me to keep my eyes up, but then also keep me engaged and eager. So I always imagine that they're running the time I want.
Which is not a bad way to approach the experience. It is a fair way to approach it because you need to have your mind focused on something and helping with your eyes to look at something, even if it's imaginary. Not a bad thing. And
I also mentioned setting a few goals because sometimes we let ourselves off the hook when we're on our own. So like we're not hitting our A goal. We're not hitting the time that we were hoping for or wanted. It's great to have more than one goal, maybe a secondary or even a third goal that we're also trying to achieve because we know that we can do something on that day that's going to help us, in the future. Because a lot of times time trials or things that we're doing on our own are a stepping stone to another event or another level of fitness. So keeping that in mind is always great, especially in those solo efforts.
Yeah, and it probably is worth wondering, and we don't know specifically with your case, Juliana, but for anyone who's doing the time trial type of thing, what's the reason for the time trial? In many instances, it's like a virtual race, and you're trying to actually like run a competitive performance. But in other instances, it's a time trial purely for the training or some other kind of purpose that isn't performance focused. And so then the advice slightly changes if it's not performance focused, because then you're really trying to work on something more specifically. And so then you need to zero in on what that is. And in many instances, it's things like, don't wear your watch if you're not focused on the outcome itself, but you're focused on trying to work on something in the time trial. Don't wear the watch because that's distraction. Instead, focus on whatever the thing is you need to do. Is it form or posture? Is it just you're trying to get yourself to be able to focus on the mental edge it takes to run hard for a prolonged period of time and things like that.
And another thing that I mentioned along those lines was to only check your watch at set increments because it can be a temptation to continually look at the watch for feedback because you're not getting other kinds of race feedback. But sometimes that can really challenge us because we'll be seeing that we're slower or the GPS is lagging or, something's wrong. I listened to a podcast, Sarah Hall was talking about how her watch during the London Marathon was not connecting to GPS correctly. So it can actually hinder you when things aren't working quite right. Or even if they are, just the mental aspect of it. It's great to have maybe every mile increment looking at the watch instead of all the time. So kind of setting that up beforehand so that you're ready for the race.
So, lots of other interesting thoughts and questions and comments out there. Share them with us, and we might share them here with the audience at large.
So thank you to Julie.
Thank you, Juliana. So this week, our question focus that we're going to try to answer, and this time it's going to be just Andy and I attempting to answer the question of how can runners intelligently modify training? And we're really thinking about the concept of when you need to make a change in your training, how do you do so that is effective to accomplishing your goals, to being in line with what you're trying to accomplish, or if you need to change the plan entirely, there's a lot of different things going on there.
Yeah, and the reason that we're talking about this is because I've had a lot of questions about modifications, and Zach is my coach. So this is a great conversation to have with him for me, but also, diving into what we do, because sometimes life throws us curveballs, whether we're not feeling great, or maybe we have a time constraint, or we want to run with somebody and that doesn't really fall in line with that day's goals. What do we do to modify, and how can we do it well?
So stay tuned for a deep dive into that question and its practical answers after the world of running.
This week in the world of running, we have a rarity, and that is a race walk event, because those have been extremely limited due to COVID. Race walk, Antonella Palmisano. She broke the Italian 10K race walk record with a time of 41:28 for a 10K. That's a great running time for a 10K.
41:28 walking.
And that's the fastest time in 18 years. And then 6th all time.
That's really something.
Yeah.
So 6th all time, not a world record then, obviously, but fastest in nearly 2 decades.
Yeah.
Just really saying something. Very nice. So race walkers out there, good things. All right. We've got the update from, we mentioned last week, the Michigan Pro Akiden, which is the marathon relay race that they did on the east side of Michigan. And so that's a team competition. And we had kind of set it up for you as there's 7 teams, pro teams mostly, certainly all elite teams coming and competing against each other. And unfortunately, one of the teams couldn't make it, but the winner of the event was the NAZ, the NAZ Elite group from Arizona, and that crew, they did some serious work. They were running fast times, and they were competing well. And basically they held the lead the whole time, but there was always like a little bit of, because we're talking about 6 different legs in a relay.
Right. Men
There's
and
a little
women.
bit of give and take. Yep. It goes every other male, female. And then, at times a team would be gaining, and it was usually Hanson's A group. They had an A and a B group. Their A group was 2nd overall. And at times it looked like they were gaining, and then they lose some ground again. And so it was, it was what you would hope these kinds of things to be, which was a race. It was a competition. It was very exciting stuff. And then Minnesota Distance Elite took the 3rd place prize. Prize. Yeah, there was a prize. So we mentioned Bowerman Track Club was scheduled to be there, and they were certainly a favorite given their current standings in the world of track and field. But they could not show up. And it looks like, if the presser is accurate, they got COVID and thankfully decided to keep that to themselves.
Well, no.
Okay, no. So actually, seriously,
they did. Exposed,
they were exposed,
yeah.
and in all seriousness, we hope for your health, and we certainly, don't wish that on anyone. So hopefully, the quarantine is as brief as these things can be, and they're back in action soon. So that group wasn't able to make it, but the other 6 teams were there competing, and Dathan was out giving the commentary.
I didn't know he was going to be doing that.
It was great.
Really great to see him.
Yeah. Well, we didn't actually see him. We weren't there, but
I was watching on the live stream.
Yes. So you saw him virtually. Very great stuff. Apparently, there were rumors of Nick Willis riding around on a bike, cheering people on too.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Good and exciting. Okay, so don't forget, though, that was only part 1 of the Michigan Pro races, which means if you're listening to this on the day we're releasing the episode, then tomorrow is part 2. So this is Wednesday, October 28th. Is the Michigan Pro Half Marathon, and most of the people in the race are with those groups that were running in the relay the week before. So they're coming out for, the relay, the longest leg was 10K, and so now they're throwing down in a half marathon, and it's quite a list of athletes. It's going to be a really exciting time, but we definitely wanted to at least preview for you a few of our previous guests or recent guests are going to be racing, including Kira D'Amato, Jake Riley, and Joanna Stevens.
So we're excited about that. That'll be really fun to watch. We're going to link to that on our website, AtoZrunning.com/episode 56.
56.
Mm-hmm. And we have another exciting thing to share with you. This is
Hot off the press.
Hot off the press.
Oh, I stole your words. Sorry.
Yes. But Kiara D'Amato let us know that she'll be going for a 10-mile American record, a women's only 10-mile American record.
Blazing stuff.
Yeah.
It's fast. These are not small records. So, the likes of Molly Huddle and such setting these kinds of records. Mm-hmm. It's going to be
very exciting.
Stuff.
So more information can be found again on AtoZrunning.com.
Yeah, you got to go to the site if you want to know the details.
Mm-hmm.
So Big's Backyard Ultra Marathon.
Yeah. So this just blows my mind. I really cannot quite fathom. I've been talking to a lot of you out there who do ultra marathons. We have a few that we're connected to that recently have done them. So congratulations to all of you. I hope you're recovering well.
Yeah.
But this one is called Big's Backyard Ultra, as Zach said. And Courtney DeWalter and Harvey Lewis, they push themselves to do a 68-lap course, which accumulated to 283 miles.
Okay, so
that was 3 days.
Here's how this breaks down. The concept. It took us a long time to really dig into this. So we actually, by the way, we've got a link to this article from Trail Runner Mag.
Zach printed it out.
I printed it out because I gotta nerd out on this for just a moment at least. Well, so here's the thing. This Backyard Ultra thing was fascinating to me as we're reading about it. I don't understand why anyone would do this, but
because they can.
Everyone
They're amazing.
has their own. Yes, and they. I'm not belittling the accomplishment as much as not understanding the mentality. So what they do is it's a 4 1/6 mile. It's a 4.1667. So it's a 4 1/6 mile course that they'll run on repeat, and it's the start of every hour. They have to start a new loop. So basically the rule is you have to finish the previous loop in time to start the next one. So theoretically you could go somewhere in the vicinity of 12-minute miles and more or less just run continuously and never stop. Now the idea here is if you go a little bit faster, of course, then you get a break. So it's somewhere around, they're running like 56 hours of 68 hours to do this record. So, do the math. They're basically running 50 minutes of every hour was the average. I think her fastest lap was 44 minutes. So sticking pretty close to that average. And that, that's almost 3 days of running 50 minutes of every hour. So no sleep. I mean, she might be sleeping. I don't know.
For that 10 minutes.
Do you sleep for 5 minutes?
If you're that tired, I don't know.
Just fall down and sleep for a minute. Someone kicks you and you wake up and keep running.
They say that some people can sleep standing up. Maybe she can sleep while running. We
got
to get her on the podcast.
That's what you got to
talk about this.
Don't commit us. Now we got to figure out if she's even interested in coming on shows like this. All right. Well, so there's so much more that we could say about this because it's just fascinating stuff. So I gave you the breakdown there. Here's the deal. They set the world record when they did this. Now I'm saying they. So this is how there's a whole vernacular attached to the Backyard Ultra thing. So we called them laps. It's actually called yards, like backyard. So it's a 4-point-something mile yard. I wish I had a 4-point-something mile yard.
We'd love
that. So they're yards. They did 68 yards. And I keep saying they because Courtney and Harvey were together until it's a last man standing race, last person standing whatever race. And so Harvey was there and 67, but could not finish 67, which means Courtney then finished the one more loop that Harvey couldn't, the 68th, and then Courtney was done. Courtney could have potentially continued if someone else was in the race, but she had to stop because there was no one else in the race. It's a last person standing race. So what that means is she gets done and she had just set the world record by 1 yard. So the previous world record was 67. She ran 68. New world record, really exciting stuff. And unfortunately, there were other people somewhere else in the world, Belgium to be exact, who were also participating. This was a global thing. They were also participating, and they continued on. So the line here, this is great stuff. It says DeWalter was smiling and energetic after she finished.
Wow.
Running
How?
56 hours of 68 hours in total. So she was smiling and energetic, and, quote, she said, "Wow, that was fun." I don't even understand. Okay,
It's
so that's
incredible.
great, Courtney. That's great. But the unfortunate thing, as mentioned, is she didn't actually get to keep the world record more than an hour until the Belgium runners finished the next lap. And then they actually went on, and this is impressive stuff, and this is Sabe Carroll and Geertz Mirgen. Okay, they're Belgium.
Good try.
Belgian.
Good try, Zach.
Good try. Noble effort. They did 75 laps or 75 yards, as it is, to earn the global title and the new world record. Wow.
That's what we got to say about it. Holy wow.
Backyard Ultra.
And that was thanks to Trail Running Magazine that we got a lot of that information.
So we'll put the links. We've got this in another article, so you can get the full details and read about it yourself and learn the interesting vernacular about yards. Oh, I didn't tell you. It's assist. The person who is second to last is called the assist because they're the reason the last person went as far as they did. In theory, they assisted that.
That's kind of cool.
So they're
like
competing,
yeah,
but they're also assisting. It's very interesting stuff. A lot of background there. You got to go and check it out. All right, last thing, and this, I promise, is the last thing for today that we'll mention, but just purely out of the novelty of the concept here, you need to know that Boise State has recently put up for sale their indoor track facility. So you can purchase one if you're in the market for an indoor track facility. There's some caveats here. So it is an indoor track, a complete indoor track, and the facility, including the fields in the middle and all of the equipment and such, for only $350,000.
That's
actually not bad.
No, it's
right?
not.
Now, here's the unfortunate thing. You immediately see that price tag and you think, okay, well, if that's all it takes, and I'm being somewhat sarcastic here, if that's all it takes, why don't more schools have indoor tracks? Because you need them in most parts of the United States.
Yeah.
But anyway, that aside, you can buy one if you don't have one, schools out there, if you want to use the $350,000. But this other caveat is important, which is they're not selling the building, just the stuff inside it. So you got to build a building first and then put the stuff in it.
I wasn't understanding that. I was thinking of it more as like a sponsoring, like you can buy this track and it's like yours, your name's on it.
No.
Okay, well,
they're selling it
world we live in
to buy it. So
I just hope that runners get to use it. Whatever happens, whatever goes down, however this, transpires, I hope that runners get to compete on it wherever it is.
Anyone is just itching to buy an indoor track and build a building somewhere near Rockford, Michigan, we would definitely happily contribute our time on the track.
Our time.
Once it's done.
I was like, are you committing money right now?
Our time on the track. We would do that. We would spend time on that track.
Yes, we would, if invited.
Great. Well, that wraps up this day's World of Running and so many other things we could have talked about. But you know what? If you certainly stay in tune with us and our social media stuffs and follow us in all the places, we try to keep the breaking stuff. We try to keep that out there too. So you'll get even more if you subscribe.
Our topic today is how can runners intelligently modify training?
So that's the question that we will attempt to answer practically, and we've got some seriously practical stuff. And if you're like me and you like to get into the science just a little bit, or even maybe a lot of it, we're going to do some of that as well. So first, Andy, what is it that we mean when we talk about modifying training?
So it's any time we need to change our training and the times that we need to adapt.
So that's the easy answer, right?
Right.
What do we mean by modify? It's when you need to change something. And more specifically, there's a lot of different reasons, situations, scenarios where you might need to change something. And we're going to try to address as many of those as you will commonly experience in your training day to day. So it should relate to many, if not all of you. But before we say anything else, most important thing, whenever we talk about training in general, the most important thing is understanding your training, understanding the purpose of everything you're doing every day as best as you can, because you cannot truly intelligently modify something unless you know what that something was supposed to accomplish. Not just like my coach told me to do 10 by 400, but why that workout on that day for the grander scheme of goals in your training. And if you know that, then you can make some of these kinds of decisions much more intelligently.
That's the word, intelligently.
Said it enough.
Yeah. What can be modified? That's going to be our first little bit here. And there's specific features of a workout that you can modify, the length or effort of a run, and you can also modify your schedule.
Yeah, so thinking about like you changing pace, changing distance and time, changing effort, all of those kinds of things can be adjusted. Also, how many times are you running in a week? How many times you're running in a day? All of those kinds of things. The balance of easy and hard efforts. So I think it's most important to think about this in terms of why or when do you need to modify something? What's happening that makes you need to change something? So that's what we're going to try to break down here for a little bit. So you should feel like you've experienced nearly all of these kinds of situations at some point. So we're going to start with the most obvious one. If you're running a workout and you're having a hard time, like
you feel bad.
It's too hard. I feel bad. I can't do the thing I'm supposed to be doing or whatever that may be. You feel bad. You have a bad day, an off day. So what can you do in those kinds of situations? Because obviously they kind of work out, there's a lot of different scenarios here. If you're running a 10-mile tempo, if you're running 10 by 100 meter sprints, there's a lot of different kinds of things. Andi, do you run 10 by 100 meter sprints very often?
No, I do not.
So we might not necessarily be talking about that specifically as much. So let's think about this in terms of what it is that you're supposed to be doing, and we'll try to provide some examples here. So if it's too hard, if it's an easy run and it's feeling too hard, this should be obvious, right? So your goal for the day is just simply to get in an easy 90-minute run, and you're just feeling like you're really struggling. The answer is slow down.
Yeah, slow down.
Still run the 90 minutes most of the time. But again, what's the purpose?
Right.
So in most instances, that easy run is serving either one of two purposes. Either it's for a quality aerobic, but not a very high effort, but a quality aerobic session, like especially in base training, aerobic conditioning, things like that. Even like if 90 minutes is kind of near your long run, that's a good aerobic effort, just on the easy side of the spectrum. Then the purpose there is to accomplish an easy aerobic effort. And if it's feeling too hard, slow down, but still get the 90 minutes in.
Another thing too, we talked about like aerobic strength. We talked about with Kate Grace, talking about strength. So let's say your body, for instance, you feel like maybe you're losing some of your strength structurally. There are also modifications you can do. You might need to stop if you're uneven and, do
Call
some
your
modification.
Have your chiropractor meet you on the side of the road.
Wouldn't that be great?
Oh, wait, that's something different. And we don't have a chiropractor, so we're not doing that either.
So what I'm saying is you might need to stop and fix something before continuing. That might be your modification that day. So maybe you need to activate your glutes. Maybe you need to do some zombie drills. We'll link to that episode.
That was a good one.
Yeah, especially since it's October and a spooky month.
Come on, zombies.
Zombie drills, I still do them. So thanks to Mike Swinger for that.
Excellent. Yeah, so you can make changes to try to make yourself feel better. Let's assume that you've done everything you think you can do and you're just not feeling better. My general advice is don't cut the run short, just slow down and try to get in the time. So the converse aspect here is, let's say that the point of the run is purely a recovery run. Like you did a hard anaerobic session the day before, intervals or something like that, or even maybe a race the day before. And so you're just trying to recover. Well, believe it or not, the actual recovery that happens is benefited by the longer, easy effort, because you're talking about the blood flow then, and getting as much fresh, clean blood through your system as possible helps your muscles recover, especially after an anaerobic effort, kind of being the key there. And so in most instances, if you look at what you did the day before and the reason for the easy run that day might have to do with that, then in a lot of instances, you still don't want to cut the run short. You just want to slow down. Now, you can probably say, okay, I've run an hour easy and I'm just really feeling it. Feel free to call it, those kinds of things. But in most instances, it's better to run the full duration at a slower pace when we're talking about easy running. And I would say the exact same thing, by the way, about long runs. So it's better to get in the full duration at an easier pace than to run, like I'm feeling it near the end. Maybe I'll cut it a couple miles short. Better off not doing that, especially if that becomes a habit. It's a bad habit.
And this is something I'm throwing in there. Zach hasn't heard this yet, but
Great.
let's say you're
Surprises.
traveling. Let's say you're traveling and you can't run. I have had situations like this, and it's really rough if you don't move. So I actually will, if we're driving, for instance, I'll get out and I'll jog for the 3 minutes I have. Is that going to be great for aerobic conditioning? No. But what it is doing for me is it's flushing the crap out from the day before. So travel days are tricky. I realize that sometimes you're up at 3:30 a.m. and you're on the move early in the morning and confined to a seat. But take the time to jog around when possible, when you're in your potty break or whatever.
Sure. I have more than once been in a hotel for some kind of big event race weekend, especially something that's more like a championship type of thing. And more than once in the hotel late at night, just got in and just want to go to bed.
Yes.
And who do I see running up and down the halls but the competition? And then, of course, you think, well, they're doing it. I can do it too.
Yeah.
So I'm going to just run my hotel halls.
Yeah. Do what you got to do. So that's a modification for you.
So we're just talking about easy runs there. Let's talk about a specific kind of aerobic workout. So maybe it's like a steady tempo, 10-mile type of thing, as an example. So what do you do in that instance? If you're feeling badly, we're still on the bent of the reason you're changing something is because you're feeling badly. So if you're feeling badly on a 10-mile tempo, again, what's the point? So if it's an aerobic workout and your goal then is to, essentially the goal of any kind of truly aerobic workout is to elevate your maximum aerobic output. That's the long-term goal of any kind of aerobic activity. So in order to accomplish that best, believe it or not, which you probably believe it by now, the duration matters more than the pace. So get the full 10-mile tempo in and just slow down if you can't stomach it. But don't slow down progressively throughout the entire thing. Slow to a point that you feel like, okay, this is the point I'm going to sustain, and then grab onto it and hold it for a while. And if it's still too much, then, so there are going to be days where you just need to stop running. We should probably have said that earlier, but there are days where whether you're sick, something's clearly off and you just need to stop running. We're not really talking about those days right now. But as a general rule, if the aerobic workout is the intent and you're trying to especially work on that energy system, then you need to get in the duration far more than the pace.
And I have to say, I'm guilty. There are times
she's guilty of a lot of things. What are you guilty of right now?
I'm guilty of wanting your donut, coveting your donut.
I have two.
Yeah, he does.
Not intending to share them.
He told me that he would share though later. Yeah.
I've been caught.
But what was I saying about that?
I don't know. You said I've been guilty.
I've been guilty of running steady, and cutting my steady short, because I wanted to see a certain pace that I thought should be my steady. Mm-hmm. And I think that many are maybe guilty of that as well. So I'm just putting that out there.
This is the biggest problem with most modern training schedules, which advise you to run a pace or even a specific heart rate for a workout. The problem is if you're trying to run that pace and it's doing more to you than it should be, then you should be slowing down. But instead, we look at that workout schedule and we think, no, I've got to be running this pace. If I want to be a sub 3-hour marathoner, I got to run this pace for my steady tempo. But the truth is, that's not the point. The point is to grow your aerobic capacity. So you do what it takes to accomplish that goal in that individual workout.
It's not a pacing workout.
Right. And in almost all instances, the pace truly is not relevant for most training runs. Mm-hmm. And I will stick to that. Try to prove me wrong. So we're talking about when I'm feeling badly in an aerobic run, I need to get in the duration still, and the pace truly does not matter unless it's getting so slow that it's not even challenging my aerobic system anymore. But I've had days where my steady aerobic tempos are only a hair faster than an easy run later in the week for a longer duration. I don't know why. Sleep, hydration, whatever the reason is, but I still needed to get into duration. You've been there, you get that. Now I want to talk about anaerobic.
Yeah.
This is the most sticky concept in modern training. And I keep saying modern training because I feel like these things were not addressed in the same kind of way like in the 50s and 60s. But certainly they are in most instances in training schedules and plans and coaches and programs all over the place these days. So anaerobic workouts. If I'm feeling badly, what do I do to change it? And there's so many things you can do. An anaerobic workout, by the way, is largely anything. It's interval repeats most of the time, but you can do a 5K time trial and have that be an anaerobic workout too. Here's the rule. Andy loved this when I was explaining this earlier. An anaerobic workout is by design a workout that lowers your blood's pH level enough so that you're taxing your not oxygen system, your anaerobic system. So, but you don't want to do it so much, because if you do it too much, then it takes forever to recover. So you're talking about days on end needing to jog easy because you lowered your blood pH too much. So the answer to that is your blood pH level is felt by the dead weight feeling in your muscles. And so when you start to feel that feeling during an anaerobic workout, that's when you know you've lowered your blood pH level sufficiently enough. And that's a good time to stop. Yeah. And so the best answer here is, what do you do for an anaerobic workout? You do anything it takes to lower your blood pH level and then stop. Yeah. And you've accomplished the goal. Now, there are more and less efficient ways and effective ways to do that. But let's give the example of, you're supposed to run 800 repeats and you're just feeling badly. You know, I'm struggling to run almost like I'm running like my half marathon pace, and I'm just struggling. And a half marathon pace should not be anaerobic for 800 repeats. So clearly, I'm not accomplishing the goal. And I need to change something. Well, in this instance, you could change a lot of things. I would recommend almost always with something like that is cut the interval distance and run 400s instead, or 300
I
or
needed
200s.
to do that before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Andy actually talks a lot about this. She had a very intuitive coach. We brought Hodge on the show, I don't know which episode it was, a while back, talking about running faster
without
trying harder. What a title.
Oh,
so if you want some good advice, go back to Hodge's episode. We'll link to it. Yeah. What did he tell you?
Well, I was struggling to do 400s and he switched them to 200s. But essentially for that workout in particular, we wanted me to be going the pace.
There's a pacing workout.
Yeah,
for
which
race
is
pace.
it's very rare, I think, to do those kinds of workouts until the very end.
It should be. If
Should
you're
be
doing them,
very rare.
if you're doing them a lot, that may be too much.
Yeah, and I wasn't achieving the goal. And I think part of it was I was psyched out, and that shorter distance allowed for me to focus and hone in and get my form right too. I didn't have the breakdown in my form and the breakdown in my mind from doing the other repeats. So that was very good for me to have him explain to me a way out, a way of modification without stopping, without calling the workout, calling the day. He found a way to modify to save the day.
And what he's really doing is saying, okay, what's the goal here? The goal was to get the race pace. It was almost kind of a neuromuscular thing as much as it was a fitness thing.
Yeah.
And so she wasn't doing it at 400. Do it at 200s instead.
Right. And he wanted my form. That was actually a big part of it too, is he wanted to have me engaged with my full form and potential in that element for mid-distance running.
So in this sense, then, if we're talking about, you can cut the interval distance, it's really changing the complete scope of the workout, but it's not changing the purpose at all. So if I'm doing 800 repeats, I'm probably doing significant rest. If I'm doing this as an anaerobic workout, then I should be doing a decent amount of rest in between the repeats so I can go hard every time. But if I can't handle it, cut it down to 400s. But then you also should be cutting down the rest a bit too. And in general, as a rule with anaerobic workouts, it's best to just do rest that's equal to the interval repetition. It's the easiest rule to follow, and it ensures enough recovery to be able to go hard enough times to get a decent adaptation. And then you're lowering your blood pH, you can feel the heaviness in your legs, and then you know you're done. So I would not extend rest in most cases for an anaerobic workout, for an interval workout. So I'm feeling badly and I think, I'll just take an extra minute of rest and then I'll probably be able to do the 800s. Well, it's better to just cut it down and do the 400s if you can handle the pace better at 400s, because instead of taking longer rest, which largely is giving you too much recovery, it's making it harder to lower your blood pH because you're recovering too much between each interval.
You're going to feel bad at the end. You can't avoid it.
Right, yeah. So anyway, I'm talking in circles here about the science again. But so for anaerobic workouts, I like the idea of cutting the repetition distance if I can't handle the repetition. Now, let's say I'm doing 200s. Can I cut that at all? Maybe it's not really a good idea to cut the rep because you're probably not doing anaerobic anymore if you're doing like 100 repeats. That's more like glycolytic. You're just sprinting then, literally. Well, I feel like I sprint when I do anything under 800 repeats.
It feels like sprinting.
Same difference. So, most of the time, that's a good rule to follow. Now, that's one scenario. There are others. So let's think about the situation where it's a conflict in my schedule. I don't have enough time.
We are all time poor, it seems.
Time poor.
Yes. Time poor is when you don't have enough time to do everything you need to do in a day.
Wow. She had that definition on hand, and that's not written anywhere. Okay, So Andy, if you're poorly timed if you're timely poor.
Mm-hmm.
If you are that,
Mm-hmm.
what kinds of things are you doing?
So if I, in a day, don't feel like I have enough time to complete my run, first off, a lot of times it's anxiety driven and it's not the actual time frame that I have. It's just the overwhelming feeling I have too much to do. One is to do something.
Check some
No, I mean like do the run.
Yep.
And start the run is the main thing. And I think the routine is usually cut down to doing Myrtle and doing maybe a couple drills and some leg swings. I don't do my full on routine on these time crunch days.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think in general, if this is an occasional thing, like suddenly I realize I have 15 minutes less than I thought I had for my run time frame, it's better to cut down the fluff around the run, shave off some of your routine. If you do a 20-minute long thing getting ready for a run, and I know many of you don't already, so I know I'm not talking to all of you when I say this, but so I think I like Jay Johnson when he says that if you do nothing else before a run, always at least do the lunge matrix and leg swings. It takes total between the two like 6 minutes max. And
Less
if you
than
can't
that for
handle,
me.
if you can't handle 6 minutes, do half as much of everything, but still do the full lunge matrix and the full leg swings. Just 5 of them instead of 10 or whatever the thing is. So it's better to just do that, cut it really short, but do something a little bit at least is good. And if you can't even do anything at all, you just got to put on shoes and go out the door, then just ease into the run. You'll probably be fine. As long as you don't make a habit of it. It's not a good thing to do that every day. But it's better, in most instances, it's better to still get in the full run and cut some of the fluff than do that before you start cutting the run itself.
And this is what not to do. And again, I'm guilty.
Good.
I've done it before.
Andy has all our what not to do.
I know, because I've done them. All right, where I'm transparent about this. So running too fast. So like I'm on a time crunch. I'm feeling anxious. I don't have much time. I want to get 5 miles in for the day. So I'm going to run them all at 6:30 pace when it's supposed to be an easy day. And so then I kind of like messed up the next day because I'm actually supposed to do an 8-mile steady state the next day. Yeah. So that's the problem that many of us run into when we modify on the fly without thinking about it before we come into the scenario. So that's why we're having this podcast today. So you can think about it now.
Or if you're like Mark and you're halfway into a run and look at your watch and realize you have to get home as soon as possible, or you're the one driving the kids to school. Mark recently posted this. So I'm serious, Mark. I will make the sign. So if you are in a scenario where you're mid-run and you're like, oh my goodness, So again, in that situation, it may be better to actually cut the run shorter rather than suddenly change to a workout. Now, I say that, but maybe you just change to a workout and then the next day run easy instead. So you can make some of those changes. But in most instances, if you're having to change something suddenly on the fly, it's better to keep to whatever the next day's run is supposed to be. Keep the schedule going rather than totally blow it up and change something today and then have to screw up the entire week. Not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing that you're changing the week, but it's hard when you have to do that. And I think a lot of this speaks to, so there's a couple of scenarios here. One, as we get this a lot actually from athletes that we train, asking this question. So I don't have time to do a 90-minute run Thursday. Can I run an hour in the morning and 30 minutes in the afternoon, or 45 and 45? Can I cut the run up? And my answer every single time when our athletes have asked us, and when Andy and I have talked about it, my answer every single time is it's better to just do as much as you can in the one run that you have the most amount of time to do, and then call it for the day and not try to make it up on the day. And then the other option here that we hear a lot about is I couldn't get all of my run in Monday and Tuesday, so I'm just going to add on some mileage Thursday and Friday. And again, my answer is no, just do as much as you can Monday and Tuesday and keep the plan for Thursday and Friday, or don't tack on, as athletes love to say there. And so here's why. In the scheme of things, you're assuming in your training that you're doing as much or as well as you can every day to maximize the amount of training you need that day to help accomplish the goal. So by not running enough Monday, I'm doubly injuring my goal by then adding more on Thursday, because now I have changed the plan on 2 different days that week from the original plan, and the original plan was to maximize what I should accomplish to achieve my goal. So change Monday. If I need to cut it short because I don't have time, great. But don't add that on Thursday because now I'm damaging the plan in 2 different spaces.
Do you think a lot of times that happens, though, because we want to see a mileage number at the end of the week?
So, yes. So how many of you really hate it when the mileage number says something like 59? I'm looking at Andi now.
No, actually, I don't look.
She doesn't look at her weekly totals, but she
I
hates it when the round numbers aren't round.
Yeah. So, like, for instance, if I'm on a run and I'm like at 10.8, like I want 11.
So she jogs in circles at the bottom of the driveway until it says 11.
Yep.
And that doesn't count. So the point here being, your weekly total is a mostly irrelevant number. And that is an important thing to reflect on here, because you shouldn't be looking at the weekly total and saying, how can I get to that number? What you should be doing is looking at your day-to-day stuff and saying, how can I maximize what I'm doing those days? And it just so happens that it adds up to a weekly total. But that's not the focus. That's not the intent. And in some ways, it's a good barometer to use when planning, but that's not the point of the week. So yes, when you're changing time, when your schedule's confined, usually you want to try to get the most you can get out of the day's scheduled run or workout, and do what you can do, change what you need to change to try to accomplish that. If it's a long-term thing and you've got to be making changes. So I've worked with athletes in the past who say, I can't run more than 1 hour during weekdays. Can't do it. Not possible. So you're only going to run 1 hour on your weekday runs, and the weekends will do some, decent longer stuff. But if you can't do it, then you can't do it. And I think, in those instances, you still want to try to get the run in, but you can't never do stuff before and after your runs either. So you got to find the balance. Maybe Monday, Wednesday, Friday, you do a little bit longer routines, strength and mobility, and Tuesday, Thursday, you do a little bit longer runs and cut out some those kinds of things.
So, Zach, a lot of people are going to be wondering, when do you do a double, and who should be doing doubles?
Doubles. So there's mixed opinions out there about this. Fundamentally, if you look at the human body and how it works, you can do repeated workloads over time. So you can run 2 workouts in a day, for example. You see this kind of thing a lot of times, especially at the professional level, where they're working out different kinds of energy systems. My point to that is just do them at the same time. You don't do a combination workout in the morning rather than doing a workout in the morning and the afternoon. But professional runners have all the time in the world, so they can do those kinds of things, and that's great. However, for the most of us, doing doubles largely fits under the category of it helps a bit, just a little bit. If we were to look at percentage, it's like maybe an extra 2 to 3% advantage to do doubles to help build the aerobic element of what you're trying to accomplish. I would never advise doing double hard workouts in a given day, especially if it's because you can't do, like I physically can't handle doing that whole workout at once in the morning, but I'll do half of it in the morning, half in the afternoon, or something like that. That is not a good idea, because now it's doing 2 things at once. It's delaying the adaptations of the morning's work by doing the work in the afternoon, and it's delaying your recovery time. So really what you're doing is you're just basically saying, I'm going to sacrifice another quality effort a day or 2 later by doing 2 of them in one day, and you're reducing the overall advantage of those 2 workouts.
You'll feel worse
the
next few
days.
It's
less efficient. It's a less efficient means to accomplish whatever the goal was fitness-wise. So... No, I generally don't even, I don't think there's a reason for most of us to do doubles unless we have the time and space. We can do so healthily and only as padding on top as a mindset. I'm not doing doubles to replace or break up my quality efforts during the week. I'm doing the double as padding on top.
Yeah, and you've talked about maybe doing doubles in your own training that are just super easy mileage, like really, really simple.
Yeah, and that's what essentially it is. It's just jogging.
Yeah.
Anytime I've ever done doubles, it's just jogging. Never for and usually short.
Yeah. So the next one we have is something we've been talking about lately, which is jumping into races.
Yeah. So Andi loves to race. We've talked about this on the podcast. Andi loves to race, and I can go long stretches of time without racing. Now, COVID has tried my patience with this. I do not like going as long of stretches as I've had to go, but I generally can go longer stretches of time without racing, and not mind it at all. Now, for many of you, you really love, as we do, the race experience on the whole. So you like to go out there just to be there as a part of something. We were talking with Pete recently, one of our athletes, and he was going to run a half marathon or a 25K, he was saying, and largely it was because there was a chance to do it.
Yeah.
And that's great. Those kinds of opportunities are wonderful ways to keep the running spirit exciting for you. So I would say the main thing here is, as a rule, none of us should ever be racing 100%, like maximum effort racing mid-season, early season, mid-season, basically until you get to your peak period where you've done the training, you've put it all in the books, and now you can really start to test it with racing. And you can do this for several weeks. We're not talking about one race, but most of the time. So the main thing here is, if you're going maximum effort for a race, you're reducing the impact of your training around that race. So immediately after, immediately before, those kinds of things. And so you're delaying your primary goal. Now, if your primary goal is to run races every weekend and love it, then I stand corrected. You're not reducing your primary goal. But for most of us, we're training toward a certain race or event or performance. That's kind of our focus for a season. And if that's the case, most mid-season races cannot be maximum effort. You can, however, do it.
Yes, and you can PR.
Sure. If you're
That's what happened to me last year.
That's an exception to the rule, Andy. Most of us are not running PRs in easy mid-season runs.
But races. You can do, as long as you're not going over the edge, aerobic fitness can take you a long way.
There is opportunity for that, just never maximal effort mid-season. And among many other possible situations. So here's the problem. When we talk about modifying training, it's very contextual, obviously. We're trying to provide a number of blanket contexts there. But the reality here is you're likely to experience a context where you have to make a change and you might not know what to do. And so, we're trying to apply rules as best as we can. But the most important thing is always know the purpose of the run or the day or the week, and do what you can to replicate that purpose if you have to make a change. So change it in such a way that you're still accomplishing that purpose. The first is the purpose of the day. If you cannot accomplish the purpose of the day, look at the intent for the week and try to maintain that as best as you can. And if you can't maintain the intent of the week, restructure the week to maintain the intent of the overall season goal. What is my purpose this season? What am I training for? And if I need to make some changes, still change them in such a way that I can accomplish that goal.
Right. And another part of that may be as well, if you are sick or injured, training through that does not accomplish your end goal, because you got to be healthy to get to the start line. So that kind of modification is a sweeping one, but it's always good to keep in mind what is that thing that I want in the end.
And that's it. So the question has now been answered. How can runners intelligently modify training? And the answer is, first, by evaluating the purpose of the things you're trying to do and your goals, and trying to, as best as you can, determine what can be done to still accomplish those goals. And there's a lot there, and we understand that. So we've done what we can to provide some examples here, but we know, and you know, that if you feel like you need help getting that accomplished or understanding how to do that well, we're definitely happy to do that. In fact, that is one of the ways we provide help the most for most and many of our athletes and a number of our followers, just like you.
Yeah, we appreciate you joining us. And again, if you do have questions, feel free to reach out to us. And next week, we're going to be talking about recovery, which I think is a great companion to this episode, where we're talking about training and modifying, because recovery is an essential element of training as well.
So next week, what is recovery and when does it matter?
Join us then. We'll talk to you next week.